Good afternoon. How is everybody today?
Good afternoon. Are we supposed to speak or
You can speak
no?
if you want to. I'm just going to go through I'm going to go through how to fill out a car contract really quickly for all of y'all, in case you have not been able to do it. So, all right, there we go. My internet might be a little clunky. Um, so I'm actually going to turn my camera off to see if I can get a little bit more bandwidth. So, um, we're going to start just in a training loop. We're going to go to templates, and then we're going to go to car interactive forms. Hey, Brandon, welcome. And then we're going to type in condo because we're just going to do a condo contract today. That's the one that you're going to use the most often in the city of Chicago, probably. So, how do we fill out a car contract? I'm going to skip this autofill. And then we'll just go sort of line by line for all of this. So at the very top, can you all see my screen, by the way? Yes. So pretty simple stuff up here at the top, the buyer and the seller. If you don't know who the seller is, then just ask the other agent how the seller's name should be represented on the contract. And then you'll go down to line 4, and that's where the address of the property goes. Address, zip code, all of that stuff. The property index number is going to be on line 5, and that can be found on the listing sheet, or it'll auto-populate if you start the contract on the MLS. If it's a condo that has a parking space, then you would put the parking space number in line 6, as well as whether it's deeded a limited common element, which means that it's not priced separately, assigned, which is obvious, and then indoor or outdoor. And if it is, in fact, a deeded parking space, then it'll have its own PIN. And likewise, when you put in the storage locker number here, it could also be deeded limited common element or assigned. If it is deeded, then once again, it's going to have its own PIN. Section 2, fixtures and personal property. You're basically going to list everything that is listed in the MLS. So if the MLS says it comes with a refrigerator, a range, a dishwasher, garbage disposal, and a washer and a dryer, as well as, say, 2 window air conditioners and central humidifier on the furnace. For lighting fixtures, I usually put all unless one of them is excluded. And then your however many garage door openers you have, if you have something like that. Tack down carpeting, you're just going to use that if it's wall to wall. Fireplace screen and equipment, gas logs, and then you just go through and you just check everything that's appropriate. Other equipment would be kind of a catch-all. Now, generally speaking, you're always going to put not applicable on line 21. And if the seller's excluding something, you'd put it on line 22, like the dining chandelier. Or if they're not excluding anything, then you just put NA. Purchase price is pretty evident. Closing costs, you're only going to use section 4 if the seller is going to credit the buyer closing costs. So that could be either a dollar amount, or it could be a percentage of the purchase price. Once again, number 5, you're only going to use number 5 if you are asking the seller to provide a home warranty and you know how much that's going to be, or you can put TBD if you don't know that yet. Earnest money. So you have to figure out based on the MLS whether the listing brokerage holds earnest money or, like Kale, does not. And if the listing brokerage does not hold earnest money, then you'll have to find out from the listing broker's attorney, or the seller's attorney actually, who's going to hold the earnest money. It could be an attorney, it could be the title company, could be any of those things. Generally speaking, in Chicago, our initial earnest money is $1,000. That is not required. That's just like sort of typical. And generally speaking, this would say something like a personal check, or it could also say wire transfer, or however you structure it. And you generally like to give 2 business days after the acceptance date, just to give yourself a little time. Then it'll be increased to a certain percentage if you're going to do more earnest money to say 20% of the purchase price, or 10%, or 5%, or more commonly, you'll see somebody put a dollar amount in there, like maybe $10,000. Once again, that is not a rule or anything. That's just what you see a lot. And for that, I also always want to put 2 business days afterward, just to give yourself time to get that money over to whomever is escrowing the money for you, to make sure your client is not in breach of its contract. If the contract is subject to a mortgage, then you're going to use paragraph 7. If it's not subject to a mortgage, then you're going to skip paragraph 7 and you'll just type is not. But if it is, then you're going to have the date that you're going to have the mortgage by. And one thing I don't like about dot loop is that it does have a calendar in that instead of words. And so for this particular thing, if we were writing to today, maybe you would close on the 29th of December. But generally speaking, I like to put 1 week before closing, because that's when it usually is clear to close. Then you would put how much the buyer is financing here, like a certain dollar amount, or more typically a certain percentage, like say 20%. And then the mortgage rate not to exceed, that number is going to be something that you're going to want to get from your buyer's lender. That's going to be the cap, not the current interest rate. So right now we might have a cap of 8.5% per year. Generally, it's going to be amortized over 30 years, but that depends on how your client is financing. And generally speaking, we don't have a loan fee. That would be points that the buyer's paid, or something like that. When we get done with mortgage contingency, we're going to go down and obviously we're going to put in the date that the closing is going to be. I think we were going to say like the 29th for the closing. Oh, which reminds me that I made a mistake up here. We would say that it was the 22nd was the day, the week before closing was the day that we were going to have the mortgage contingency. Now, we got the closing date put here, 12/29/2023. And then all of this is boilerplate, pretty much, unless you're going to do a post-closing possession rider, because the seller is going to stay in possession of the property after the close. Then this contract does assume that the seller is going to surrender possession at closing. The deed paragraph is once again boilerplate, just saying that the seller will give you clear title to the land. Real estate taxes are usually paid are always paid in Cook County a year in arrears. So right now we just finished paying the second installment, or the second installment of 2022, and the first installment for 2023 will come in March, and it will be 55% of the total from last year. So we're just going to put an amount in there that's ridiculously low, and then you'll put whether it's subject to any exemptions, like homeowners exemption, senior citizens exemption, senior freeze, and historical tax freeze. The most often you're going to see is the homeowners exemption, and you can check that in county records, but it should be reflected on the MLS sheet. So that brings us on to section 12, the homeowners association. So the almost every condominium has a homeowners association. And so you're going to put the regular monthly assessment in here. Let's say it's $150. And if there is a special assessment, that means they're going to bill everybody separately for a particular project, usually a capital improvement, then you would put has. Generally speaking, there's not going to be a special assessment. So if you have checked there is not going to be a special assessment, then you would just put NA here and NA here, and then you would put shall not be assumed by the buyer at closing, just to make sure you have everything dotted. So you're going to move down through this. This just details all the things that the seller agrees to do, including getting you the bylaws, the meeting minutes, the house rules, the budgets, the cash flow statements, as well as a letter certifying that they are up to date on their assessments. Now we get down to disclosures. Disclosures. If the disclosures are on the MLS, they would be found under Additional Information tab in the upper right-hand corner of the listing. So if you have seen the disclosures, then you would obviously check yes. If you have not seen the disclosures, then you're going to check no. You should always, generally speaking, you should always just give somebody a lead paint disclosure pamphlet. But if there's no lead paint-based paint disclosure because the property was built after 1978, then you won't have that disclosure. And likewise, if it's a condominium, third floor or above, it won't have a radon disclosure. If it's first floor, second floor, or a single family, then there will be a radon disclosure, but you may not have seen it yet. So I'm just going to say that we have seen none of this and go on with our day. Confirmation of dual agency. We don't do dual agency at Kale, so you don't need to do anything, but not applicable there. Attorney modification period is generally, it doesn't have to be, but it's generally 5 business days. And during that time, you'll have your inspection and you'll get all of your documents from the condominium association and have a chance for your clients to review them. So this could be 7 business days. If I were writing a contract today, then I would put 6 or 7 business days because of the fact that we have a holiday. And then the inspection period is generally the same as the attorney modification period. It doesn't have to be, but generally speaking, those 2 things will be concurrent. So if you're not adding any riders to the contract, then you're just going to put NA in this box. Well, it doesn't seem to be there we go. It's a drop down for some reason. So we save that and it says not applicable. Then you go down to contract shall be in no force or effect if not accepted by seller on or before. Generally, I don't like to put more than 24 hours. So if I were writing this contract today, I would want an answer by the 23rd, which is tomorrow. And the offer date obviously is today, the 22nd. The rest of this stuff is informational. You need the buyer's address, email, all of that stuff. Same thing for the buyer's broker's information. That's you as the designated agent, your MLS, your license, your brokerage, Kale's MLS and license, and then the address of the brokerage, your phone, fax, probably not, an email. And if you have your buyer's attorney's information, you can put that here and you can put the lender information there. But as it says right here, the names as addresses set forth are for informational purposes and only and subject to change. Then you have a couple more pages or one more page of boilerplate stuff, general provisions, the way that taxes are going to be prorated, talking about title, the agreement of how to dispose of the earnest money if the title falls if the deal falls apart, sorry. And then the definition of operational systems as they can be defined in the contract. One thing that I will go back and talk about a little bit more is this thing down here that says buyer agrees that minor repairs and maintenance collectively costing less than $250 shall not constitute defects covered by this paragraph. In addition, another thing to remember is that if a major component is operating, it is in the function that it was intended, regardless of aid, and does not constitute a health or safety risk, then that's not something that a buyer can ask to have replaced. And the easiest way to explain that is you can't ask for the furnace to be replaced just because it's old. So at this time, I am going to start my video again, and I am going to open things up for any questions that y'all might have. Does anybody have any questions about what we've talked about or some other part of the contract that we haven't touched? One thing that I just thought of is if we go back up here to real estate taxes, I did forget to talk about prorations. General real estate taxes shall be prorated based on, and this is negotiable between the buyer and the seller. A lot of people put in 110%, some people put 105, some people go as much as 115 or 120. I will say that this number often changes during attorney review. So you might put down 105 and the attorney thinks that it should be 110 because it's a reassessment year or something like that. So that is the one thing that I didn't cover on that in that one paragraph. So is anybody out there having any questions about any of this? All right. It's sounding like you don't. In that case, I am going to say to everyone, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to say to everyone, have a lovely Thanksgiving and get some time off and some good food. And we'll see you next week. Okay? Bye.